Good morning. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to take a break from looking at the Gospel of Luke this morning to go back to the Old Testament to look at someone named Gideon. And the story of Gideon is kind of an underdog story. And we like underdog stories, whether it's sports or fiction or movies. We appreciate a good underdog story. But we don't always appreciate when we're the underdog, because being the underdog can be kind of painful. It can be difficult. It can be frustrating. It can be hard when we are facing seemingly invincible odds, whether it's at work or financially or at home or just in life. It can seem like the weight of the world is upon our shoulders. And that's not comfortable. That's not an easy thing. And so being the actual underdog can be kind of tough. What I like about the story of Gideon is that it's not just one of these stories, like a lot of other underdog stories that we're used to, where it's not a true story. The story of Gideon is real. In fact, I was reading just this past week about how archaeologists in southern Israel, they found this 3,100-year-old pottery shard or fragment of a jug that has written on it the letters that represent the name Yerubbaal or Jerubbaal, which we know is a nickname that was given to Gideon when he was a judge in the time of the judges. And so archaeology and history has actually proved the biblical text to be true. That there really was this person named Gideon, this underdog who God uses to help his people. So before we kind of extract some application from this story, I think it's really important to dive into the context of it. So we're going to see two important things here. The first one comes directly from the context of this story, and that is that God is active in taking care of and raising up a leader for his people. And that's kind of the whole story of the Judges, is that God is active in the life of his people. He doesn't leave them down and out. He raises up leaders to help them during their time of need. And so that's the kind of a general thing that we will see in this story. But to make it a little bit more personal, we're going to see that God can do a lot with a little. And in our lives, that rings true. God can do a lot with a little bit of faith. God can do a lot with a little bit of strength. God can do a lot with just a little bit of hope that we have in him. So let's read Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 1. It says here, "The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, in caves, and in strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help." So there's this cycle in the period of Israelite judges where God's people sin and they turn their backs on God. God raises up some kind of opposition, an opposing force. Here it was the Midianites and other eastern peoples, people that came from the east. He'll raise up an oppressing force to judge God's people for their idolatry, for their wickedness. God will raise up a leader, and God will deliver his people. And that cycle kind of continues throughout the book of Judges. We're just seeing one little kind of section of that cycle happening here, playing out here with the Midianites, and they actually are so oppressive that they drive the Israelites out of their towns and into caves and into the hills, where they're kind of just able to come out every once in a while to plant crops. But when they plant their crops, the Midianites come and they destroy them. So this is a real problem that God's people have. Is this constant kind of ebb and flow where they will turn their backs on God, find themselves in hot water with neighboring peoples, and then they'll cry out to God for help. And it's kind of the classic prayer and plea that at some point in our lives, all of us are guilty of just kind of sending out an SOS, to quote a Sting song. We're sending out an SOS in the form of a prayer. God, please help us. I messed up. I did something wrong. Now I'm in this situation. SOS, save our ship. Please, God, we need your help. And that's what they're doing here. They're sending out an SOS. They cry out to the Lord God for help. That's the problem. Now we're going to see the prophecy. So we've seen the problem. Now let's look at the prophecy in verse 7. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord because of Midian, he sent them a prophet who said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. I rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, and I delivered you from the hand of all your oppressors. I drove them out before you, and I gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me." So the problem is God's people are being oppressed because of their sin, because they turn their backs on God's. The prophecy, it's not prophecy in the sense of a future revelation of something that's going to happen. It is God using the prophet to tell God's people what's going on. They're in this situation. The problem has come upon them because of their disobedience, because of their disloyalty, because they haven't listened to God and they haven't prioritized their relationship with him. Now, not every time, but a lot of the times when we face problems in our own lives, if we look back on where those problems started, sometimes they can be the result of our spiritual failure. Our failure to place God first, or to listen to God's voice, or to put into practice some of the just basic truths of Scripture. Now that's not always the case. Sometimes we face problems in our lives because of any number of factors that are outside of our control. But sometimes we have to admit we just mess things up because we choose not to listen to God. We choose not to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. And here the prophecy, God's spokesperson, is saying, you guys messed up. You didn't listen to God, and that's why this is happening. Well, God is going to raise up a person to help with their problem. Let's meet this person. Let's read verse 11. It says, "The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.' 'Pardon me, my Lord,' Gideon replied, 'but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, "Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?" But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian.'" The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have, and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied. "But how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." So we know what the problem is, and we know what the prophecy says. And now we've met the person who God is going to use to address the problem. And this person's name is Gideon. The meaning of the name Gideon is hewer or feller, and not feller in the way that we use it, like, "Hey there, young feller." This is hewer, as in somebody who hews a tree, or feller, somebody who fells a tree. It just means to cut down. And so Gideon, the name of the meaning of the name Gideon just means one who cuts down, like with an axe. And so when we meet Gideon, the one who cuts down, he is actually threshing wheat, and so he is separating the kernel of wheat from the outer shell, but he's not doing it out in the open where it would normally be done. He is doing it in a wine press. And then this is because he is afraid that the Midianites, if they see him threshing wheat, they will come and they will forcefully take that from him. And if they do that, there won't be any food for his family. And so he is threshing wheat in a wine press out of fear. When God's messenger approaches Gideon, his greeting is really kind of ironic. What does the angel, the messenger of the Lord, say to Gideon? "The Lord is with you." And you can almost hear Gideon chuckle at that greeting. The Lord is with you. Is he, though? Is he really with me? As I thresh my wheat where I should be crushing my grapes? The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Am I really a mighty warrior? You know, the Midianites have forcefully oppressed us, and I'm not really a mighty warrior. I'm more like a scared citizen. And so you get the picture. There's some irony here. When the messenger of the Lord comes to Gideon and says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," those are two things that don't seem to be true. Doesn't seem like God is with him or his people, and he doesn't really feel like a mighty warrior. And so there's something really important here, and that is perspective. Gideon's perspective, the way that Gideon sees himself. Gideon says, and we're jumping kind of to the end of what we just read. Gideon says, "How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in the tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." I am the least and weakest. I'm nothing. I'm a nobody. How can you call me mighty warrior? How can you use me to save my people? Not only that, by the way, where have you been, God? Where has God been? The God that saved us out of Egypt, where has he been? It doesn't feel like or seem like the Lord is with us. What we're looking at is perspective. And Gideon's perspective is, God is not with me, and I'm a loser. I'm a nobody. I am weak, and I can't do this. Gideon's perspective is, God isn't with us, because look at all this trouble that we've had to face. God's perspective is, I am with you, I have been with you, I will be with you, and you are a mighty warrior. So, something that I think is a great lesson in the story of Gideon is that God sees things in us that we don't always see in ourselves. Gideon doesn't see himself as a mighty warrior. Gideon doesn't see God as being with him or his people. But God says, hold on a second. You have some strength. He tells him in verse 14, the Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have. There's some strength that you have that you don't know about. You just need to realize it, Gideon. When we can embrace God's perspective, then we can see ourselves in a new light. And that's encouraging and helpful in order to face the problems that are in front of us. If Gideon can just believe that God is with him and he still has some strength and that he is a mighty warrior, well then, maybe, just maybe, something can be done about the Midianites in our own lives when we're facing problems, sometimes problems that we have brought upon ourselves because of our disobedience, because of our sinfulness. If we can just look at ourselves with the perspective that God has on has about us, you are my beloved child. You are redeemed. You are forgiven. And even though you mess up, even though you have been disobedient, even though you stumble sometimes, or maybe just things just aren't going good for you, my child, I am with you. You have some strength. You are a mighty warrior. Remember that. See yourself that way. And then maybe, just maybe, we can face problems with a newfound strength. And so here is where everything begins to change for Gideon. And it's where, when we face problems in our own lives, things begin to change when we come to this realization. Verse 16, the Lord answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. Basically, God tells Gideon, you will be the mighty warrior that I said you are. Your identity is one who tears down, one who cuts down. You will live up to your name. You will be the mighty warrior that I said that you are, because I will be with you. Doesn't it make all the difference in the world when we realize that God is with us? That God is fighting for us. That God is on our side. Sometimes we just need to remember that God is with us, in spite of our weaknesses, in spite of our little faith or our little strength or the little hope that we have. God is with us. We'll fast forward to Judges chapter 7, and let's read verses 1 through 21 to see just how all of this plays out. It says, early in the morning, Jerubbaal, which is what Gideon's opponents had begun to call him. It's the nickname that they gave him. It's what was on that pottery fragment that they found. Jerubbaal just means let Baal contend with him, or let Baal deal with Gideon, because something that Gideon did was he tore down and he toppled over his father's statue of Baal, or his father's altar to Baal. And so the people started calling him Jerubbaal, or Jerubbaal, which means let Baal deal with him. So early in the morning, Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all his men camped at the spring of Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me, saying, my own strength has saved me. Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead. So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. His army gets a little bit smaller. But the Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink. 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. So the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home." So his army gets even smaller, just 300 men. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites home, but kept the 300, who took over the provisions and the trumpets of the others. Now the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley. During that night the Lord said to Gideon, "Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward you will be encouraged to attack the camp." So he and Purah, his servant, went down to the outposts of the camp, which must mean that he was afraid, because God said, "If you are afraid, then go down to the camp." Gideon's scared. He is afraid. He's having a hard time believing that God is going to do what he said he's going to do. Which means he still doesn't really believe that God is the identity that God has said that he has is a reality. Verse 12, the Midianites, the Amalekites, all the other eastern peoples had settled in the valley, thick as locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. Gideon arrived just as a man was telling a friend his dream. "I had a dream," he was saying. "A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friends responded, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed down and worshipped. He returned to the camp of Israel and called out, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. "Watch me," he told them. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. And that's how God used Gideon to defeat the Midianites with an army of just 300 men. They didn't use swords, they didn't use any weapons other than jars and trumpets, and God saved his people. That's a great underdog story. Underdog story in the sense not only that Gideon is seen at the beginning as kind of this weakling, scared person threshing his wheat in a wine press, but really the whole nation of Israel here is an underdog in the face of a seemingly invincible foe. The Midianites, the Amalekites, the people of the east. But we see how God uses this underdog to defeat a much larger enemy. God can do a lot with a little. And in our lives, God can do a lot with just a little bit of faith. If you just have a little bit of faith, God can do a lot with that. All it takes is a mustard seed in order to move mountains. If all you have is just a little bit of strength, sometimes we feel so weak. We're so tired. We're just so beaten down. But all it takes is a little bit of strength. When I am weak, then I am strong. God's grace is perfected in our weakness. All it takes is a little bit of strength, and God can do a lot with that. Maybe we just have a little bit of hope. Things seem like they're not going to make a turn for the better. But if we just have a little bit of hope, if we just put a little bit of hope in God that things will result for our good and his glory, God can do a lot with that little bit of hope. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. And so today I want to encourage you. You may feel little. You may think of yourself as little. You may feel like all you have is a little bit of strength or a little bit of faith or a little bit of hope. But even that, if that's all you have, God can do a lot with your little if you trust in him and believe in the power of his word. Blessings.